The haunted ghost stories continue with another installment from Mr. Big Shot Cooley. So get ready again for another episode of The Hat Man. I hope you enjoy. My encounter with the Hat Man took place not long after I graduated from high school in 2003. I'd had a few experiences with the paranormal in my childhood, but nothing really worth noting. The most significant experience I had was seeing an apparition at a campground when I was 13, but I can even dismiss that experience as something I might have just mistaken as paranormal. Only the Hat Man stands out in memory as something out of the norm, something that I can't explain away. It was sometime in early winter when I had the Hat Man experience. It was a cold and overcast day when I and my boyfriend at the time decided to take a short hike down the railroad tracks that follow the Brandywine River. Hiking was something we did quite a lot since we both loved being outdoors, as we were too broke to do anything else. We started out in Emberville County Park, where the Brandyville and the train tracks run parallel to each other. The area has a long forgotten history, such as an old poor man's cemetery and ruins of stone buildings. I also heard that during the Revolutionary War, some British and or Haitian soldiers camped out in the area before the Battle of the Brandywine. To continue, we were about a mile or so into the hike when I saw an empty turtle shell off to the side of the tracks. I thought this is a bit strange until I saw some stones laid out in what seemed a deliberate pattern. They were in the shape of a circle divided into what appeared to be the outline of a cross, some kind of solar cross, I think. I pointed it out to Johnny, who got very excited about the turtle shell. I didn't think much of it, but I think it's somewhat odd that someone would pick this random spot to arrange such a pattern. I don't know if it had to do with anything with the Hat Man, but I thought it was worth mentioning. We then decided to take a break and sat down on the edge of a nearby bridge. This is when I started to feel very uncomfortable. It was an ominous sort of feeling. It was really unsettling, but I didn't say anything since I've always been an anxious person. Also, the cold was bothering me a bit. However, the longer we sat there, the stronger the feeling became. I remember getting up and pacing a little. I began to feel like I wanted to just go home, but we'd already been out there for about an hour, and I didn't want to seem like a whiner. Finally, Johnny asked me what was wrong, and I told him I felt weird and tired and wanted to go back home. He thought I was mad at him for some reason, but instead I wasn't. Just that I was probably just tired from work the day before. He got up and gave me a reassuring hug. Suddenly, the ominous feeling intensified as I felt we were being watched, which was ridiculous because we were in the middle of the woods. But my attempts at reasoning didn't diminish the now growing sense of dread. Fear began to wash over me as something over Johnny's shoulder caught my eye. Off to my right, on the opposite side of the tracks, there was a hill that had been partially cleared for electrical transfers. At the edge of the woods, there was something moving up the hill, but away from us. I was sort of relieved for the smallest second, thinking, it's just some random person looking there for us. But then it stopped out of the woods into the clearing. It was a figure of a person, but something inside me was telling me that it wasn't human. It was all black from head to toe. It was so black that it seemed to absorb the light around it. It was one solid mass of super concentrated darkness. This thing was wearing a trench coat or a cape and a wide-brimmed hat. I couldn't make out any of the facial features. It seemed to be literally out of pitch. It took several long strides into the clearing and stood at the base of the transformer, hands in its pockets, or at least it looked that way. It stared at me the entire time, never looking away to navigate. The second it had revealed itself from the cover of the trees lining the clearing, I felt terror unlike anything I've ever experienced before or since. I remember vaguely wondering why I would react like this to what I still wanted to believe was just some idiot dressed in weird clothes. I wonder if it was possible that my eyes were playing tricks on me, or maybe I'd just gone off the deep end and was hallucinating. I felt as though my blood had literally turned to ice and my heart had dripped out of my chest. It wasn't panic. I know what panic feels like. This was different. It was dread, foreboding, sinister, and awful. Johnny must have felt me freeze up, or maybe I said something to him. For the life of me, I can't remember because I was just petrified. Just then, Johnny turned and saw the thing standing on the hill. I remember him saying in a very confused and frightened tone, "What the fuck is that?" At that point, any concerns I had about my own sanity were extinguished. This was not normal, and even worse, it was real. The figure just stood there on the hill staring down, staring directly at me. It didn't really move, or make even the slightest sound. It just stood there and stared. It felt like pure evil was emanating right through me. In a moment of clarity, my fight or flight mechanism kicked in, and I sure wasn't going to fight. If we didn't leave, and now, something unimaginably horrible was going to happen to us. I was sure of it. I grabbed onto Johnny's sleeve and began to move, almost dragging him along as I went. He tried shaking me off and was mumbling something about confronting it. Now I was wondering if he might be insane. I insisted that we leave. Johnny was not an aggressive person at all, but he wanted to fight this evil phantom. "Who are you?" he yelled. The black as coal figure did not respond. He just kept focusing on me. I decided I wasn't going to wait another minute. It was time to go. I said something along the lines of, "Fine, go ahead and die. I'm leaving now." I'm not sure if I was walking or running. I just knew I was moving away from this horrible, evil, dark thing. It wasn't a moment, and there was Johnny was behind me. I guess he'd either changed his mind or had been trying to be tough. At that point, it didn't matter, as I was glad he was with me. I took one last look over my shoulder to make sure it wasn't following us. Blackie had in fact climbed further up the hill, as if he was trying to keep me in view. However, it wasn't following, which was the most important thing at the time. The Hat Man. Yes, that is the name I eventually gave it. The Hat Man just stood, watching. We retreated to the car as quickly as possible. At that point, I was feeling just slightly less threatened, but still very distraught. We got in the car, Johnny on the driver's side, and the engine roared to life. He kicked it into gear, and we sped out of there as fast as we could. On the drive home, I struggled to make sense of what just happened, but for some reason, I didn't say a word, nor did Johnny. In fact, we never spoke with the Hat Man again. A magical man on the deck. We built a house on a lake in Michigan. The house is actually on an island in the lake. No roads on the island, no roads to the island. You have to get there by boat. There are 10 houses on this island and about 10 empty wooded lots. Plus the center of the island is wooded. No houses. When we were first building, my kids and I found some really old, probably from the 40s or 50s, marble in the water, right by shore where we were putting in our dock. This really isn't exciting yet, so I apologize. I have to give a little background first. Well, we have been seeing the ghost of a man on the island for about 12 years now. My daughter first saw him one day, yes, in the day, while we were walking around the island. She's asked me, "Mommy, who is that man?" I didn't see anyone, but she said she saw a man sort of standing behind a tree with a large black bag in his hand. He had a hat and a long coat on that came down just past his knees. I thought he might be a neighbor, but when we got to his house, he was mowing his yard in shorts and no shirt, no hat either. Well, I didn't know what she saw, so we sort of just dropped it. About a year later, my son started seeing the same man at night. We had finally gotten the house finished enough to actually live in, and many nights I would hear footsteps coming up the stairs, outside, walking across the deck, and then down the path. At first I figured it was one of our neighbors, but this happened even when we were alone on the island. I was sleeping there with my kids one night. I was having a very vivid dream, and in it, I was watching a man checking out our boats on the dock. He then started walking up the stairs to our deck. It was night in my dream, and because of the shadows made by the moonlight on the trees, shadows covered part of him as he came up the steps. In my dream, I watched him walk up the steps and onto the deck. He walked across the deck, stopped, and looked into the windows. Just then, my son woke me up saying, "Mommy, Mommy, there's a magical man on the deck." I asked him what he meant, and he described exactly what I was seeing in my dream. A man in a long, dark coat and hat coming slowly up the stairs, onto the deck, and looking in our windows. I asked him what was magical about the man. And Jake, my son, said I could hear him walking, but he had no legs. In my dream, the shadows covered him from the waist down, so I couldn't see his legs while he was on the deck. It was like Jake was seeing exactly what I had been dreaming, or was dreaming what he was seeing. Well, from then on, my son started sleeping in the living room almost every night. He would sleep there so he could see the magical man. The man always did the same thing, walk up the steps, across the desk, pause to look in the windows, and then go off the deck and down the path. When I found out Jake was sleeping in the living room just to see the man, it really bugged me. I didn't want him becoming friendly with a ghost, but Jake was never afraid of the man. He said he felt the man was just coming back to check on us, make sure everything was okay. My daughter saw him a few times too, and said it was the same man she had seen in the woods that one day, but she was afraid and would not sleep in the living room very often because of it. I continued to hear the footsteps on the stairs, deck, and down the path. This went on for years, and we tried to find out who the man could be. There's another island on the lake right across from us called Snake Island by everyone on the lake, but maps label it as a Strawberry Island. A friend happened to give us an old map of the lake, and we saw that Snake Island was labeled Scout Island on that map. We asked around about that and found an explanation for our ghost, I think. Back in the early 50s, Scout Island was owned by the Boy Scouts, and they used to camp up there. One night, while they were camping, a really big storm came up. The wind and lightning was really strong, and because of the fear of the fire and falling trees, the Scoutmaster decided to get the boys off the island. Back then, they used large rowboats to cross the island. The Scoutmaster got all the boys in the boat and started rowing for the main island. They didn't make it. All boys and the Scoutmaster drowned. I don't know for sure where the boat sank, and I assume they recovered all the bodies. After hearing that story and since then finding several written accounts of the event, we decided our ghost might be the Scoutmaster. Maybe he really is just checking on Jake, making sure he is okay. Jake has always had the feeling that the man was just checking on him. We continue to see the Scout leader on a regular basis every summer. I've also seen what I think is the Boy Scout boat a few times. I like to sit on the dock at night, and one night while I was sitting there watching the stars, I noticed a long boat about midway between our island and Snake Island. The boat was in the shadow of Snake Island and had no lights on. Thought, what are you guys doing? So I shined my flashlight on the boat, and when I did, the part of the boat that should have been in the light was not there. There was nothing there, but the part of the boat my light was not shining on was. I could see half of a boat. I freaked and ran up to the house. But since then, I've seen the boat a few more times and am not so scared. It just floats in the shadows between our island and Snake Island. When it gets past Snake Island, it disappears. Sorry this was so long, and I will tell the story of the other ghost on the island another time.